It's another edition of Time About the Movies, and today we're taking a look at the films of November 12th, 1999. We have 5 big movies to look at today, so let's just go ahead and jump on into it. We'll start off with the biggest new release of the weekend, Pokémon, the first movie.
Calling all trainers. You are summoned to the greatest challenge ever. Prepare to witness the rarest and most powerful of all. This fall, training is over, and the ultimate showdown begins. Kids WB presents the first Pokémon movie ever. Catch it November 12th.
Pikachu.
Only in theaters.
And unlike Doug's first movie earlier in the year, there's a reason why this is called Pokémon the first movie, because they had all these movies ready to go. Doug's first movie put that out there thinking that it was going to be that big of a success, and they were going to make sequels after that, and they never made another movie after that one. But Pokémon had the movies already ready to go, so they called it Pokémon the first movie. And basically you got the story here of a group of scientists offered funding into genetic research if they agree to try to clone the greatest ever Pokémon, Mew. The end result is successful as Mewtwo is born. However, Mewtwo is bitter about his purpose in life, kills his masters, and in order to become the greatest, he throws open a challenge to the world to battle him and his Pokemon. Ash and his friends are one of the people that get brought into this. They pass the first test to prepare for battle. However, they soon find out after further cloning and Mewtwo's ultimate plan to take over the world. So, before we get into this, I kind of have to remind myself of my nostalgia, because I did grow up around this time when Pokemon was the thing, in the late 90s, early 2000s. I have at least some recollection from where it all began. I might have been somewhat of a fan growing up in the time period. Anyone who knew me in high school and elementary school knew I was pretty hardcore into Pokemon at the time, but then again, most kids back then were. I watched the cartoon series. It was coming on just as we were getting Kids WB up where I live. And the movie was coming around the time to capture my zeitgeist. So naturally, as I got older, Pokemon and I went our separate ways. I really was into mostly the first 4 seasons of the show. And then, like most things, I moved on with my life and went on and so forth. And I did go see Pokemon the first movie in theaters. And I had the VHS. I used to watch it all the time. But I grew out of it, too, like I said. But when this came back to theaters in 2016, I figured, what the hell, I'll go back to see it just for nostalgia's sake. And let me just say right now, the movie does not hold up well with time whatsoever. It has not aged whatsoever. The story for this makes no sense whatsoever. And it's not like the movie isn't trying. The whole movie is centering around Mewtwo trying to find what his purpose is in the world after being the first genetically created Pokemon. And you can understand the character's dilemma. He's trying to figure out what his purpose is. And we're not really given a reason to buy into his plight, because the movie starts off with him literally killing off the scientists who created him solely because he's been used as an experiment. Now, as I later found out down the road, in the original Japanese version, there was actually a reason why Mewtwo was cloned. The scientist was trying to find a way to clone his deceased daughter, and through visions, Mewtwo is told by the daughter that he's more than just a clone, but his own person. Which would have made it a much better reason for that to happen in the original film, to lose it in the lab instead of just snapping and blowing up everybody like they did in the American version. Even the prequel they tack on the video doesn't make a whole lot of sense either. And on top of that, Mewtwo is supposed to be a Pokemon with psychic abilities, and yet, shortly after the explosion, he's approached by the show's villain, Giovanni, leader of Team Rocket, to team up with him. And by team up, Mewtwo learns his purpose was to be a weapon for Giovanni's benefit. He's supposed to be psychic, and yet he can never figure out that he's being used by the bad guy. So not only that, but his whole purpose in the second half of the movie is so hypocritical as hell. I mean, his whole idea is that enslaving Pokemon is wrong, and what happens? He enslaves Pokemon, and in the ultimate form of hypocrisy, captures all the trainers' Pokemon with his own Pokeballs to create his own series of clones so they can take over the world, of course. And not only that, the plan makes no sense whatsoever. And the problem is that the movie builds on some pretty interesting and cool setups, like the scene where Pikachu is trying to escape from Mewtwo's Pokeballs. That's a good, pretty intense scene. The visual look of the island's pretty impressive. The cloning machine has a little bit of an H.R. Geiger feel to it. It's really cool looking. And the whole idea of Mewtwo and Mew going to combat each other while the clones and the others duke it out sounds like it could be epic and awesome to see, but then the ending starts, and boy, it's one hell of a cluster, you know. Where do we begin? It starts off with this lame song playing over scenes of Pokemon, not even really fighting, just pushing into each other, and that's about it. And then just when you thought the hypocrisy levels couldn't get any higher for this, the next 10 minutes is nothing but a padded-out message about how fighting is wrong and how Mewtwo can't understand why this is wrong. And I'm sorry, but for a franchise that exists solely because the monsters fight with each other to just all of a sudden now say it's wrong to fight, that's the ultimate form of hypocrisy, and it just pads on and on and on, and it makes no sense whatsoever why it's here. If there was a scene in the film where they show the difference between a normal Pokemon fight and the type of fighting what Mewtwo is trying to do, then it would make sense, but there's nothing different about how the Pokemon fight near the end and the fight from the beginning of the film, and so none of this talk about how fighting is wrong makes any sense whatsoever. And then Ash has to intervene, gets turned into stone. Again, never explain how that happens. It just happens when Mew and Mewtwo attack at the same time. And after all this negativity I've been giving the ending, I'm not going to lie. When Pikachu cried and tried to resuscitate him and then he realized that he couldn't do it, it's genuinely heartbreaking, mostly because of what those two have been through since they met in the beginning of the series and all that Ash has done to protect Pikachu. It's a good emotional scene that does feel genuine and effective, but then they ruin it. The movie destroys it with this ridiculous bull about how all the tears of the Pokemon somehow brings him back to life. Yeah, how does that work? I mean, if you're going to go the Peter Pan route where you have to say, I believe in fairies, like, you have to be a little bit more clever than that. Care Bears 2 tried to do that, and that was not clever either. And if I'm saying that if I'm saying that that's not as clever as Care Bears was, then that's a serious problem here. But again, the Japanese version kind of explains it a little bit better by saying that the tears are the key to life, which is still off, but it at least serves as a better reasoning for what this movie does. And so they stop, Mewtwo and Mew stop fighting, they all fly off with a clone Pokemon, and they all live happily ever after, and then, just for the fun of it, Mewtwo wipes everybody's memory, and just like that, the entire movie becomes pointless. Mewtwo manages to put everything back in the same morph area they were at the start of the movie, with Mewtwo's storm still going on, which, if Mewtwo had wiped all the memories, why couldn't they go back to where they were before they got the invitation to the island? Why back at the war? Why would the storm still be going on at this point? And that just makes this movie make no sense whatsoever. The plot holes in here make no sense whatsoever, and it's a disappointment watching it all these years later. As a kid, yeah, you get into it because you see the Pokemon on the big screen, and you could just nowadays, you can clearly see that 4Kids had no real intention on making this make any sense because they knew they were going to make the money from this. They just put this out as quickly as they could. This thing came out over a year after Pokemon made it into the zeitgeist here in America, and they put it out so they can get it out within the shows and trading cards popularities. It's the literal form of a cash grab at its worst. Now, at times, the animation does look nice, the music does its job nicely, there are some good ideas overall. The movie overall is just a failure because of a bad story, bad motivations, a forced and hypocritical ending with a message that goes completely against the spirit of what the purpose of the original storyline of the franchise was supposed to be. And the end result is a 100% pointless film. The funny thing is, the sequels that came after that were much better and more in line with what you would expect from the Pokemon mythos, and those ones were not as successful as the first film was, which is a shame, but we'll get to those ones as we move along here. But if you actually if you're actually going to watch a Pokemon movie again, go watch the other ones. Go watch 2000. Go watch 3. Hell, go watch Detective Pikachu. You're going to get a lot more than you'll get with this movie right here. I mean, seeing it in theaters was pretty cool, but as a kid, as a grown-up watching it again, it does not hold up well over time, unfortunately. So that's Pokemon the first movie. Very lengthy review on that front, but let's go ahead and move on to Kevin Smith's newest film, Dogma.
What do a single white female, 2 prophets, guys against just so far the sky, you know, the 13th apostle, and
let me guess, the 14th apostle
have in common? They're all trying to stop 2 fallen angels from destroying all existence. Outstanding work! Dogma.
You knew Christ.
No, for the only $12. Rated R. Starts Friday, November 12th in theaters everywhere.
So this was Kevin Smith's follow-up to Chasing Amy, which kind of was a return to form for him after Mallrats didn't do so well. But this is a film where you have Ben Affleck and Matt Damon as 2 fallen angels who plan to employ an alleged loophole in Catholic dogma to return to heaven after being cast out by God. But his existence is founded on the principle that God is infallible. Their success will prove God wrong, thus undoing all creation. The last scion and 2 prophets are sent by the Seraphim Metatron to stop them. And you have characters such as, you have a cast that also includes George Carlin, Linda Fiorentino, Janine Garofalo, Chris Rock, Jason Lee, Salma Hayek, Bud Cort, Alan Rickman, Alanis Morissette, and Jason Mewes and Kevin Smith. In fact, a lot of the people that you see from the Clerks films are in this movie. And, I mean, it's a good movie, but, it's definitely not one of Kevin Smith's better movies. It's a film that really has a kind of a little bit of a tonal shift. Like, it doesn't know if it wants to be a straight-up comedy overall, or does it want to be seen as a little bit more of a more dramatic film. Because at times in the trailers, and then especially in that commercial, it feels like they're trying to have both of them. And I don't think Kevin Smith really handles that well in this movie. He's done it well in a couple of other films we'll eventually get to, but Chasing Amy, he did it pretty well, but here it just feels like there's a good story here, there's a good idea to it, but there's just way too much going on here to really kind of cement this as one of his better films. There are good funny moments in here. There are a lot of really good, well done funny moments in the film itself. But other than that, though, it's just some good ideas that just really don't quite live up to what they should be living up to. It just kind of feels like he's kind of repeating himself, but I get what he's trying to do. He's trying to do something a little bit different, but I don't know. It just feels like a mixed bag of a film. It's not one of my personal favorites from him, but it's a decent enough film. I would say it's worth a watch if you want to see some Kevin Smith stuff where he's trying something experimental and actually succeeds, unlike the stuff he did later on down the road with stuff like Tusk and Yoga Hoosiers. I don't know what the hell Yoga Hoosiers was all about, but this, it's fine for what it is. Could have been a lot better, but as it is, it's perfectly fine for what it is. Let's go on to our next film. Luc Besson's The Messenger, the story of Joan of Arc.
Give me an army that will save France from her enemies.
At 16, she convinced the king.
With half of France in the hands of the English, what have I got to lose? The other half.
And inspired an army.
Does she even know how to ride a horse?
She knows.
500 years later, her passion is still changing history. The Messenger, the story of Joan of Arc, rated R.
So as the title indicates, the story is about Joan of Arc, played by Mila Jovovich, the French war heroine and the religious martyr of the 100 Years' War. It also begins with young Joan as she witnesses the atrocities of the English against her family. She has visions that inspire her to lead the French into battle against the occupying English. Her success in routing the English allows Charles VII to take the throne. Eventually, Joan is captured by the English, tried and executed for heresy. Pretty standard story for Joan of Arc. I mean, they did a miniseries in '99, which was honestly a lot better. That had Lily Sobieski in it. This, kind of like with Dogma, felt like something Luc Besson was trying to do that was outside of his norm. A lot of directors were doing this around this time. We've already talked about what Sam Raimi and Wes Craven were doing around this time. But kind of like with those directors here, it just feels like there really wasn't a whole lot to this film to make it work. It doesn't have that edge to it. It's way too long. It's almost 3 hours long. And I'm sorry, man. I just do not get the appeal of Mila Jovovich. I've never liked her as an actress. I've only seen her in a couple of one or two things that I've actually liked her in, but I've never liked her as an actress. I don't think she's that good, but that's just me personally. I feel like this is a film that could have been a lot better if they had actually made it more interesting and not have something that we've seen done over and over again, and had it been a lot shorter. This really should have been a much shorter film. But, yeah, for 3 hours long, you need to have something more interesting and more epic to really work with here. Like, look at what happened with Oppenheimer and Kills of the Flower Moon. Those were made by people who knew how to keep you entertained throughout the course of that runtime, even though it was a long runtime. But here, there's not really a whole lot there to really make it stand out. It's a really boring film. Not that engaging, not that exciting. Hard skip on that one. So, with that said, on to the next film. Susan Sarandon and Natalie Portman in Anywhere But Here.
About mothers and daughters, since Terms of Endearment is also one of the true Oscar contenders of the year. Anywhere But Here is a triumph. Susan Sarandon is positively staggering. Natalie Portman is flawless. Both delivered Oscar-worthy performances.
Even if she's ruining their life, there's something about my mother, some romance, some power. She is the reason that I was born.
Anywhere But Here, rated PG-13. Tomorrow, only in theaters.
You know, just because you keep saying it's Oscar-worthy, doesn't mean it's actually Oscar-worthy. In fact, this thing was not Oscar-worthy. In fact, it never The only thing it ever got was a Golden Globe Award, and even then, a Golden Globe Award really isn't saying a whole lot. I mean, but Anywhere But Here, this is a story basically kind of like Terms of Endearment, where you have a fed up with her small town Bay City experience. You have Susan Sarandon playing a woman who leaves her family and second husband and heads for Beverly Hills with her daughter, played by Natalie Portman. The teenager resents the move, and her mother, always flamboyant behavior, and Terms plans to get away from the university on the East Coast. And Mom's plans are different. She wants a movie star for her daughter. So it's basically trying to attempt Terms of Endearment all over again, and it's just not a good movie. It's a film that, like I said, it's trying way too hard to be the next Terms of Endearment, to be that next big weeper film that wins all the Oscars. And I'm sorry, Terms of Endearment was a good movie, though. This is just not. I mean, this is a film that is just literally screaming Oscar bait. And I like Susan Sarandon, I like Natalie Portman. They've won Oscars in the past and present, but man, this was just a dull movie. This is a film that is trying desperately for an Oscar and just fails on so many levels. Even though it's got a really good director behind it. Wayne Wang is a great director, but man, he misses the mark on this one big time. This is a film that just didn't work in the long run. Avoid this one like the plague at all costs. So let's go ahead and move on to our last film, Usher, starring in Light It Up.
This all began because of the conditions of our school.
I'll never be listened to.
Right. You want books so you take a cop hostage? Give me the heat. They're coming in here. Guys are gonna get killed. What we really want is respect.
If anything happens, that means the rest of your life.
The producers of soul food.
Give us what we asked for.
Green light. Light it out. Rated R. Wednesday. Only in theaters.
So the story is, you got these five high school seniors. One of them is played by Usher, one of them is played by Robert Richard, one is Rosario Dawson, one is Fred Astaire, and the one is Sarah Gilbert. And you have them and one sophomore played by Clifton Collins Jr., who hold a wounded police officer hostage and barricade themselves inside the school. And there was a movie kind of similar to this a couple of years prior to this, Toy Soldiers, back in 1991. That's the first thing I kind of thought of with this film, and I thought the trailers for this looked kind of interesting, but watching the film when it was all said and done, it's kind of a disappointment, considering the talent that they have involved in here, and the fact that this director actually studied under notable directors like Francis Ford Coppola and Ridley Scott, so he knows from watching a master at work on that, but masters at work working on this, but this is the first film I think he ever directed, and actually, let me double check just to make sure here. I think. Let's see. Okay, this is actually his second film. He directed a film in '92, That Night, which, quite frankly, I don't remember if I ever looked at, nor do I really feel like I should look at it, but this is not his first film. I should point that out right away, but he has worked under some other directors, notable directors, so you would think that he'd get a chance to do something a little bit to have his own unique vision to it. And there's just really nothing there to this film. It's a film we kind of have seen done over and over again, done much better, despite the fact that they have some really good talent involved in here. Forrest Whitaker, Rosario Dawson, Vanessa Williams, Usher, Sarah Gilbert from Roseanne. I didn't think she'd be good enough to play a teenager in this, but sure enough, this was still kind of around that time. Technically this was still kind of around that time when she would have been close to her teenage years, in her 20s, so I guess that makes kind of sense. But Glenn Turman's also in here, Judd Nelson, I mentioned Clifton Collins. There's a good cast involved in here. There just really needs a better story here, like to really give it its own unique edge, give it its own unique spin compared to some other movies that are very similar to this. I don't know. It looked like it had potential at the beginning, but in the end, it just kind of felt like it was a mostly forgettable film. It's a shame, because the talent in here is good, but the movie, unfortunately, is not. So that's Light It Up. So with that said, we wrap up another edition of Time About the Movies. We head into the week before Thanksgiving with three big heavyweights. The new James Bond movie with Pierce Brosnan, The World Is Not Enough. We also have Tim Burton's Sleepy Hollow with Johnny Depp and Christina Ricci. And the limited release of Toy Story 2 comes out this weekend. So we will delve into that on the next episode. So 3 big movies to talk about next time. But until then, Thank you very much for watching, and if you want to see more videos like this, please hit the playlist on the next page, check out the previous episode, and I'll see you guys tomorrow for another episode. So thanks for watching, I'll see you next time. Until then, as always, take care.